Well, hello, this is Jeff Gaudiosi, and it's another edition of the Blues Fix here on misplacedstraws.com. And my guest today is really just one of the great young guitarists, not just in the blues scene, but in any scene. He just released his third full length record to go along with a couple of EPs, and as you would expect, it's total fire. Please welcome Jared James Nichols. Welcome, Jared.
What's up, Jeff? Thanks for having me, man.
Oh, my pleasure. And let's start with the record. I mean, your new self-titled record came out a little
Mhm.
while ago. Who joined you on it? Who's your band on the record?
So the band on the record, it was a crazy band. It was two other guys. It was Dennis Holm, who's been my longtime drummer
Mhm,
since basically I started my trio,
mhm,
and then an old friend of ours that we reconnected with when I moved to Nashville. His name's Clark Singleton on the bass guitar.
mhm. And I gotta tell you, I mean, from the very beginning of the record, that drum sound throughout is monster. I mean, it sounds so good.
It's super aggressive, and it's funny, man. When we were making the record, that was one of the things we wanted. Every instrument, it's such a simple setup:
Mhm,
guitar, bass,
mhm,
drums. But we needed it to fill a certain sound and have a certain attitude.
mhm.
So we were really excited with the way the drums came out.
Yeah. And back in 2021, you put out the Shadow Dancer EP,
hmm
and those 4 songs are on this record. As
hmm
far as the rest of the songs, were they written around that time, or did you have that base and then kept writing up until this record?
Yeah, the second part of what you said, I find myself always writing.
Mhm,
So while we were doing that Shadow Dancer EP, ideas were coming in and there were things on there that I was like, all right, this is great. And then that almost fueled the fire to do the whole record
mhm,
because we really felt like we achieved the sound on that Shadow Dancer EP. And it was like, okay, how do we take this? How do we chase this and keep going and bring it up a notch? And that's when we started to write songs like I was writing My Delusion
mhm,
and Hallelujah. And these were songs that were coming out after that. And
mhm.
truth be told, even the single Down the Drain, it was the last song we cut, and we weren't even gonna do it. It just came, like, way later in the process, and we are like, "Alright, let's go back in and do that." So, right up until the very end, basically until mixing, we were just cutting songs and creating.
Well, and it's funny because one thing that I really enjoy about the record is there's such diverse songs, but they're all unmistakably you. I
Mhm,
mean, you have like kind of a melodic rock with Skin and Bones, the heavy blues groove of Hardwired. I mean, just
mhm.
that gorgeous flange in Out of Time.
Thank
When
you.
you write, do you kind of have an idea of where you're gonna take the song, or does the song take you wherever it's gonna go?
Before this record,
Mhm.
I would always take the song where I thought it needed to
Yeah.
go. With this record, I tried to grow as a songwriter, I tried to grow as a vocalist and say, okay, I'm going to do my best to just be present, be in the moment. And what I find a lot with songs is if I push too hard in the beginning, let's say I write a riff and a melody up with a vocal and I go, okay, it's going to sound just like this. That's when I start to like really kind of screw it up because for me, when I take it to the band and I say, okay, here's the idea. And then it's almost a collaborative effort because it's like, okay, what do the drums feel? How does this feel as a unit? I always have this mindset of like, can I pull it off live?
Mhm.
Not that every song will always be played live, but I always want my music to have a breath to it, that human element. So with this record, I made that conscious decision to say, okay, I'm going to get out of my own way. I'm not going to try and force these songs into any box. And a lot of that stuff, like you were talking about, like the flange
Mhm.
or, any of these kind of things, it was almost as if like that was the final coats of paint. It
Mhm.
was like, you know what I mean? Like I brought in a rock basically, and I was like, okay, here's the rock. What do you guys think we should do to trim it down? And then we just went like that. So it was a really organic experience. And like I said, man, I just tried to be present and put my best foot forward for whatever was good for the song.
Well, and I think that shows your growth as an artist and a writer because listening to this record compared to your others, like I said, there's a diversity to it,
Mhm.
but it all comes together. Whereas with your previous records, I don't think we saw quite the diversity we see here. So I think it shows an evolution in you that you sort of allow yourself and your band to try out some different things.
Totally. I never, before this and having to make music, like my first recordings were the first times I was ever in a studio.
Mhm.
I never thought about the flow of a record. I never
Mhm.
thought about even um, you know, songwriting. Songwriting to me used to be a means to an end, where it was like,
Mhm.
okay, the song is basically a vehicle for my guitar playing.
Yeah.
It's a vehicle for an attitude, and let's go.
Mhm.
But as I've grown, and I'm so happy about this, I've been able to almost step back and
Mhm.
get out of that shell and say, okay, I am at heart a song guy. Like like most of us, oh, I love this song. We're not like, oh, I love this solo from this, of
Yeah.
course there is
Yeah.
that too.
Fast
But
forward the song to get to the solo.
yeah, exactly. We don't have a compilation of solos. Well, maybe we do. But that to me was really important. So I said, I want to dig in, and moving forward, I just want to dig in as a songwriter and see where I can push it that way. Because I think that there's so much left to say,
Mhm.
especially with an electric guitar, in the rock, in the blues genre. It's just you have to be willing to move with it. You have to be willing to say, okay, let's see what we can bring out of this. Let's really think about it, and let's really try and shape something.
And speaking of your guitar playing, I mean, you're well known for kind of an unorthodox finger pick style.
Mhm.
Was there somebody when you were starting out, when you were growing up, where you're like, "Oh, that looks cool, I wanna try that," or was it just happen as you started playing?
Well, what's funny about me is I'm a lefty.
Mm,
So I write,
mhm,
I'm left hand dominant.
mm,
So when I picked up a guitar, I wanted to be lefty. And it was like an old acoustic at, my parents' house.
mm,
And I remember when I got my first electric, I was sitting in the store holding the right-handed guitars
mm.
like a lefty. And my first guitar came with a free lesson. The first thing the guy said was, "Hey man, you got to flip the guitar." So I flipped it and I tried to use a pick, but what I noticed, since I'm left-hand
Mhm,
dominant, I never really could like
mhm,
get good with the
yeah,
pick. So I did it for a while, but then I was like, man, I like to feel the strings under my
mhm,
fingers, just like on this hand. And the guys that I saw that were using their fingers, I knew about like classical guitar players, using their fingers, but I was like, ah, that's to me, I was like, that's not speaking to me. So it was like obviously Jeff Beck.
mhm,
I was seeing Derek Trucks and
mhm,
the way that he plays the guitar. Um, a little bit of Mark Knopfler,
mhm,
like a little bit of that
yeah,
style. Then the other big one was Albert King,
mhm,
blues guitar player.
mhm.
And the way that he played and the way he picked with his thumb, I was like, well, if these guys can do it, I want to do that. And I never had a dream of being a professional guitar
Yeah,
player or anything like that. So I was just doing it to have fun. And people would say, hey, man, you got to use a pick. If you don't use a pick, you're not going to be a professional. And I was like, I don't care. I'm having fun. And it just kept growing. And no one really showed me how to do it.
mhm,
It was just a feel thing.
yeah,
And it kind of developed from what felt right for me.
yeah. And it shows because there's there are certain guitar players where when you listen to them, not only do you recognize their sound, but it feels effortless.
Mhm.
It's like, there's, hundreds of hours of practice there, but it flows. And I think that's sort of a hallmark of your style is there's a flow to it. It's a lot of times with finger picking too, you hear the individual,
Right.
but with you, I think it comes out very smooth in the mix, and that's a really cool thing.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, it was one of those things when, people started to go, "Hey, you're that no pick guy," and I never thought of it like that. I was just more along the lines of like, "Okay, this is what feels right," and I never wanted to be that clicky
Yeah.
click, where it's like,
Yeah.
ugh,
Mhm.
So thank you for saying that. The one thing I always think about is like, alongside the finger style is, you can hear a lot about a guitar player and their bending and their vibrato
Mhm.
and their touch. So I really wanted to work on that. And really, if you love it or you hate it, I always George Thorogood told me once, he's like, man, I don't care if someone says they hate the way I play, but when they hear me on the radio, they're gonna know it's me. And
Yeah.
I thought that was the coolest thing ever, because it's kind of true. It's like,
Yeah.
everyone has different styles and opinions,
Mhm.
but having your own sound or having crafted your own voice with an electric guitar, I think at the end of the day, that's the coolest thing to do.
And kind of along those lines, you know, especially I think with the current crop of blues guitar players, it keeps the genre alive. It's really evolved probably more than any other genre over the last 50 years or so. And younger guys like you really bring an edge to it to grow the audience. Whereas when you look at like kind of classic rock stuff, especially the fans, I mean, they're content with hearing the same songs, you know, the bands go out playing the same set. I think you've sort of straddled those lines and that you grow a blues audience, but you also bring in those classic rock fans that usually
Mhm.
don't like change, but they're willing
Right.
to listen to you.
Well, what's funny about that too is like our single on this record, Down the Drain,
Mhm.
at radio, I'm getting different spins, everything from like, of course, like my friend, I'm name dropping like Bonamassa and his show and all, you know, all these cool things. But then we're noticing not only is it blues, but it's like they're playing it on classic rock some places. So it's like, and you know as well as I do, it's like classic rock plays this. Classic rock is classic rock. So I've been really I've for the love of the music, I've always loved I in the beginning I only wanted to play traditional blues, but I always loved rock. I always loved
Mhm.
classic rock. So it was really important for me to try and straddle both lines and to really kind of dip my toe into each, you know, each
Mhm.
water because I find a lot of similarities in the music
Mhm.
and I think especially now it's 2023 and it's okay to do, you know, like to mix genre. Because remember when it was like, "Oh, man, you
You
know, I only
didn't.
play blues," you know, the Blues Police.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that shows in your touring. I mean, you've toured with everybody from classic rock bands to blues legends.
Mhm.
When you're doing that, do you approach your set differently based on the crowd of the band you're with?
Yeah, you know, I really do. I I try and be, like, out of the way again with shows, like, I want to be an entertainer, and I want the people to love being in the moment and hearing
Mhm.
that live music. So, you know, like you said, I have played gigs with everyone from Honey Boy Edwards, who was the oldest living bluesman who played with Robert Johnson, to metal festivals in the Czech Republic. You know, like, I've run the gamut,
Yeah.
man. I've played the craziest of gigs like that. So I try and cater the set to really kind of the I want to use the word like the color of the artist I'm
Yeah.
playing with.
Mhm.
Like it's like if we're gonna be playing with old classic rock band like Blue Oyster Cult, you
Mhm.
know, I'm gonna cater it to like that color of rock
Mhm.
and roll where it's like a little bit more like, all right, cool. We're totally in that classic rock vein,
Mhm.
but I'm kind of pushing on the edge of like a little bit,
Mhm.
maybe a little bit heavier. But
Mhm.
then, you know, when I go out and we toured with Walter Trout, and I was
Mhm.
like, okay, cool.
Love Walter.
This is gonna be my early ZZ Top moment. You know what I mean? And then it was like Zach Wild, Black Label
Yeah.
Society. It's like, let's play heavy. That's what they
Yeah.
want to hear.
Mhm.
And I think what's cool about that is at the end of the day, when someone finds me and maybe they'll go, oh, that guy was pretty
Mhm.
cool. Let's check out his music.
Mhm.
Then they'll hear the other shades of it and they'll go, you know what? It's pretty cool.
Mhm. Is it kind of refreshing then when you get to do your own gig, like on your own at a club, and you're like,
Oh yeah.
okay, the chains are off. I can do whatever I want to do.
Absolutely. It's funny though, like my bandmates hate me because we'll have our own shows, right? And I just get into it and I just start jamming. And it's like almost like rapid fire, where like they don't we do have a set list, don't get me wrong, but all of a sudden we'll be playing something and then I'll be like, you know what? I feel this in the room right now. I
Mhm.
feel this, and
Mhm.
I'll get into something else. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I really try with the live element to just like be like in the moment and just like go for it. And when we do have our own shows, like when we go to Europe, man, we'll play and this started happening one of the first times we went there. We'll be in like Spain, right? And they stay open and they party all night. So let's say our set was only supposed to be an hour and
Mhm.
20 minutes or hour 15,
Mhm.
right? We play for 3 hours. We just go for it, you know, and they loved it and we loved it. But my bandmates would start to go, dude, come on, you know.
We're
So it's pretty fun.
tired. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But it's funny. I was looking at your website and you just came off a European tour. You got a bunch of US dates coming up in April and May. And I had to laugh because you have one set of back-to-back dates where you're on a bill with Pantera and Rob Zombie, and
Yeah.
then you're on a bill with Lucinda Williams and Allison Russell. I'm like,
How
there's
hilarious
literally
is that?
nobody else that could do that.
It's funny, like, yeah, I know, I think about that a lot too, and I have a lot of friends that, obviously play in other bands and stuff, and they're always like, "Jared, you always play the most," they say, like, "random bills, man." You know, it's like that, Pantera and Rob Zombie, and then we go to, like, also, we're doing a festival with, like, some reggae bands,
Mhm.
Ziggy
Yeah,
Marley, and,
Ziggy
you know,
Marley.
so it's like, how's that gonna happen? But that's what's kinda cool, I feel like, about, um, this kind of this part of music that I'm doing is it kinda fits in a lot of different
Mhm,
applications, and it's fun for me because it keeps everything fresh too.
mhm.
It keeps everything kinda like, "All right, what are we doing? Where are we going?" You know? And, there's even times, man, where we'll be playing somewhere, like, we're doing this, like, biker festival, you know? And those will we do one show at a club, and then we do one show like we're gonna open up, do the Rob Zombie
Yeah.
thing and all that. But at the club show, I say, "All right, guys, we're doing half originals, half covers, and we're gonna blow these people away, and we'll play like all that old
Yeah.
stuff that they love,
Yeah.
just for fun," you know?
Mhm.
Because to me, it's like they get the flair of familiarity where they're like, "Oh, I love this song," and then I can play one of mine, and they're like, "Ah, this is cool." You know what I mean?
Well, it's funny because for a guy like me, I'd be at both of those festivals, the one with Pantera and Rob Zombie and with Lucinda Williams and Allison
Yeah,
Russell.
man.
So that's why it's like I see you doing that, and I'm like, that's the guy,
That's cool. Yeah.
Now, what do you see for yourself going forward? I mean, do you see yourself kind of continuing to grow as a solo artist? Do you ever see yourself kind of doing the Black Country Communion thing and putting together the all-star band? What do you seek for
Oh,
yourself?
man, I see both. I,
Mhm,
I I always want to continue, no matter where life takes me.
mhm,
Um, as long as I'm still playing, I would love to continue the trio always,
yeah,
and to just kind of live in that
mhm,
cell. But I want to grow. I want to. Not only do I want to start a Black Country Communion Part
mhm,
Two, I would love to jam with some of my favorite bands if
mhm,
if the opportunity ever arose. But also, like, you know, I'd like to continue developing as a songwriter and in the studio. So for me, it's like I'm like a sponge.
mhm,
It's like I'll always be, Jared James Nichols, the guitar, that
mhm,
guy. But I would love to explore every other opportunity that comes my way, and just kind of be open, and open to working with different artists too, because I think that that would be a really cool thing to kind of take what I do
mhm,
and potentially collaborate with someone else that's not what I do.
mhm. Definitely. Well, again, we've been spending some time here with Jared James Nichols. The self-titled record is out. It's great. You got a bunch of US dates coming up in April and May, and then you're heading back overseas. Thank you for taking the time to do this. Best of luck in the future. It's been amazing meeting you, and hopefully we can catch you live sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeff, for everything. And I appreciate your support, man. And yeah, I'll see you down the road.
You got it, my friend. Thank you.
All right, man. Thank